Okay, so picture this. I'm sitting inside this glass meeting room at work, and Kyle just looks at me like everything I raised is some kind of inconvenience. He waves it off, saying accountability isn't a problem, it's an opportunity, right? Meanwhile, there's that Slack message at 8:04 a.m. Hey, got a sec? With the smiley face. And honestly, that already told me everything about the power in the room. I just didn't know how deep it went yet. Okay, so this is where it gets weird. Because the moment Kyle stepped in, it didn't feel like a conversation anymore. It felt like, I don't know, like the room got smaller somehow. He walks in, shuts the door behind him, and this isn't even subtle. Right, like he actually clicks it locked. Not aggressive, not dramatic, just controlled, like he's managing airflow or something. And I remember thinking, okay, that's odd, but I stay quiet. He doesn't sit, he never sits. He just leans against the wall like the space belongs to him and I'm just temporarily allowed in it. And then he starts talking, but it's not really talking, it's framing. That's the only way I can describe it now. He says there's been concern about my tone in cross-functional calls. And I swear, the way he says tone, it's like that word alone is already a verdict. Not what I said, not what happened, just tone. And suddenly, everything I did gets filtered through that. Like I'm not being evaluated for accuracy anymore. I'm being evaluated for how comfortable I made other people feel while being accurate. And I'm sitting there trying to follow it. But something already feels off. Because this isn't feedback. Not really. It's positioning. I can feel it. Like I'm being gently pushed out of the center of things without anyone saying it directly. Then he says it, this isn't disciplinary. Think of it as professional growth. And I remember just nodding, but inside I'm like, wait. Growth from what exactly? From being correct. That's when the recalibration module comes up. Mandatory. Starting Monday. He says it like it's normal. Like people just get enrolled into personality adjustments at work, and I laugh a little. Not because it's funny, but because it feels unreal. Like, I must have missed the part where doing your job too precisely becomes something you need to be retrained out of. And that's the moment it really lands. Not anger, not even pushback. Just this slow realization that I'm not being corrected. I'm being contained, like they've already decided I'm too disruptive, too precise, too something. And instead of dealing with that, they just redirect me, put me in a box called collaboration training so it sounds harmless. And I nod. Of course I nod. Because what else do you do in that moment? You don't argue when the room already decided your role. You just sit there, like your silence is part of the process now. And the worst part is how calm everything looks on the surface, like nothing violent just happened, even though something definitely did. And as I walk out of that room, it hits me harder than anything he actually said. This isn't about fixing performance. It's about control, about tone policing dressed up as development, about turning accountability into something that only flows one direction. And I just remember thinking, okay. So this is what it looks like when you're not being punished, you're just being managed out. And I remember just sitting there for a second after that, like my brain is trying to catch up with what just happened. Because nobody raised their voice, nobody insulted me, nobody even really said I was wrong. It was all so polite, so structured, so carefully worded that it almost felt like I imagined the whole thing. But I didn't. I felt it, that shift. That quiet reclassification of who I am in the room. And then it starts to make sense in a really uncomfortable way. The recalibration module, the mandatory training, the constant emphasis on alignment. It's not about helping me improve, it's about making me easier to manage, less friction, less resistance, less me. And I don't even realize I'm nodding through it until it's already done. And maybe the weirdest part is how normal everyone else acts. Like this is just standard corporate process. Like being reclassified as a problem you can train out of is something that happens in meetings like this all the time. Kyle talks about it like it's development strategy. Devon looks relieved, like the attention isn't on him anymore. And I just sit there realizing, oh, this isn't discipline, it's displacement. And once I see it that way, everything else starts to reframe itself. The locked door, the word recalibration, the way Kyle never actually asks questions, just delivers outcomes wrapped in soft language. Even the smiley Slack message from the morning feels different now, like part of the same system. Nothing is direct, but everything is intentional. And I'm sitting there realizing I'm not inside a feedback loop. I'm inside a containment strategy. And the scariest part, it's working. And I don't say anything after that, I just sit with it. Because what do you even say in a moment like that? That you've been carefully reframed into a problem you didn't know you were. That professionalism has slowly turned into compliance training for your personality. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, which is probably why nobody says it out loud. So instead, you just nod, you listen, you get recalibrated, and that's the moment I start realizing this isn't about one meeting or one manager or even one project. It's something bigger. A system that doesn't argue with you, it just slowly edits you out of your original shape. And I don't know what I'm gonna do next, but I know I'm not the same person walking out. So I leave that room, right? And I'm trying to act normal, like nothing just shifted under my feet, but the second I sit back at my desk, it hits differently. Because I know what just happened wasn't a conversation about performance. It was a rewrite, quiet, clean, already in motion before I even walked in, and I just sit there for a second, staring at my screen, thinking, okay, so that's what this is. And the weird part is, I start replaying everything I've actually done, not the version they just described, not the tone issue version, but the real stuff. Like the deployment risk I flagged 3 weeks ago that would have taken down half the client pipeline if it had gone live, or the rollback script I wrote at 2 a.m. when no one else even noticed the system was quietly degrading, or the escalation path I built that literally saved us during that March traffic spike. Real work, real consequences. But none of that shows up in their version of me. In their version, I'm abrasive. I'm non-aligned. I'm someone who challenges direction too often. And it's funny because I keep thinking, when did asking why a broken system is being pushed forward become a personality issue? Like at what point did preventing failure turn into being difficult? And then there's Devon. I don't even need to try hard to think about him because he's everywhere in the system. He's in the praise threads, the Slack emojis, the great energy comments after he misses something critical. He's the guy who once merged a half-tested branch into production and somehow walked out of it with strong initiative in his review. I remember that day clearly. I remember staying late to patch the fallout while he joked in the group chat about how fast we all reacted, like it was a feature, not a fire. And the thing is, people laugh with him. They always do. Not because it's actually funny, but because it's easier. He doesn't challenge the system, so the system protects him. Meanwhile, every time I raise something real, something measurable, something that actually matters when things break, it gets translated, softened, reframed. Suddenly I'm not raising risks, I'm resisting direction. It's the same sentence, just flipped until I'm the problem instead of the warning. I sit there thinking about that word they used in the meeting again, alignment, because that's the trick, right? It sounds neutral, professional even, like something you'd want. But what it really means is stop pulling in a direction that makes people uncomfortable. Stop noticing things too early. Stop interrupting the illusion that everything is under control. And I'm not even angry at first. It's more like this slow clarity. Like I'm finally seeing the shape of the room I've been standing in for years. I open my laptop and I start doing something I've never really done this formally before. I start logging. Not emotionally, not like venting or anything like that, just facts, clean entries, time-stamped, what was said in meetings, what was flagged, what was ignored, who responded, who didn't. I start pulling Slack threads, email chains, deployment notes, just collecting patterns. Because once you strip away the language they use, there's always a pattern underneath it. Like Devon getting praised after I flag an issue he triggered, like Kyle reacting to warnings with emojis instead of action, like my name disappearing from documentation after things stabilize. It's not one moment, it's repetition. That's what makes it real. And the more I log, the calmer I feel, which is kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. You'd think it would make me more upset, but it doesn't. It just makes everything clearer, like I'm finally separating noise from structure. At one point, I pause and look around the office. People are still working like nothing changed. Devon is laughing at something on a call, probably already retelling the meeting version where he was leading alignment conversations. Kyle walks past my desk without looking directly at me. Same routine, same confidence, same selective blindness. And I realize something kind of simple but heavy. They're not reacting to reality, they're reacting to narrative. If you control the story, you control who looks competent, and I guess I stopped fitting the story they wanted. So instead, I became a problem to manage. I lean back in my chair and just breathe for a second. Not dramatic, not emotional, just steady, because I can feel the shift happening internally. The part of me that used to try to explain things, justify things, correct misunderstandings, it's starting to quiet down, not disappear, just step back. Because I don't think this is something you fix by speaking louder. I think it's something you fix by watching longer, so I keep logging. Not because I expect immediate change, but because patterns only matter when they're visible over time. And right now, I'm starting to see all of it. The favoritism, the soft protection, the language games, the way accountability only applies downward, the way mistakes get renamed depending on who makes them. And I'm not hiding it, I'm just collecting it quietly. Because something tells me this isn't over, not even close. So I get officially embedded into Devon's unit. Right. And they keep using this word collaborator like it means something balanced, like we're equals in this thing. But the reality feels a lot more skewed. It's not collaboration, it's proximity. I'm just close enough now to see everything in real time, but not close enough to actually stop anything. First morning, I sit down at a desk that isn't really assigned, just kind of placed near his team. Devon comes over like it's some kind of welcome moment. He's smiling, already mid-sentence before he even gets there. Something about momentum again. He always says momentum like it's a safety feature instead of a risk. He fist bumps someone behind me, then turns to me like nothing ever happened between us. Like I didn't just get quietly sidelined from decisions I used to be central to. Glad you're here, he says. We're gonna move fast this sprint. And I just nod, because that's what people want. Not friction, not questions, just presence without disruption. But internally, I'm already watching. His setup is chaotic in a very confident way. Tabs open everywhere, Slack threads half read, a Jira board that looks like it's being interpreted more than managed. There's a document open titled something like final_deploy _V5 _real _this _1 _ And I remember thinking, okay, nobody who is actually confident in their process needs to rename a file like that 5 times. First meeting of the week is a sprint planning call, and it starts exactly how I expect it to. Devon is talking before everyone else even finishes loading in. He's already pitching a production change. No full regression testing, no structured QA window, just a direct push because, in his words, the client side is stable enough and we shouldn't lose the window. I'm listening, not reacting, because reacting doesn't actually change how decisions are made here. A senior engineer brings up staging concerns, very careful wording, like they're trying not to trigger anything. Devon cuts in almost immediately, still smiling. We've already validated enough in staging. Honestly, we're just slowing ourselves down if we overthink it. And I sit there thinking, that's not validation. That's assumption dressed up as confidence. But nobody pushes back hard, not really. There's a pause, a few hesitant nods, and then the conversation just moves on. Like, disagreement is something you acknowledge briefly before returning to the agreed narrative, and the change gets approved. Just like that. No escalation, no formal review, just momentum again. I don't speak, I just open my local log file, because I've stopped relying on meetings to capture reality. Meetings are performance, logs are memory. I write it down. Decision made without full regression testing. Concerns raised, not addressed. Risk acknowledged verbally. Overridden procedurally. It sounds clinical when I write it like that. That's intentional. Emotion doesn't help later when you need to show patterns. By midday, the change is already being pushed. Devon is upbeat about it. He's messaging people in Slack like it's a small victory. Big push today. Let's keep energy high. With a little emoji at the end. And I just stare at it for a second longer than I should because there's something surreal about how casually he treats system-level changes like they're social updates. I remember thinking he doesn't see risk as risk, he sees it as delay. And delay, in his mind, is failure. So anything that slows him down becomes something to override. That afternoon, I quietly check system metrics, not because I expect immediate failure, but because I want to see how the system absorbs bad decisions over time. And that's the part people usually miss. It doesn't break instantly. It degrades quietly first. A slight increase in latency, a few authentication retries, a couple of timeout spikes that get dismissed as noise. Noise is a very convenient word here, because once you label something noise, you don't have to investigate it anymore. I drop another entry into my log. Early degradation observed post-deployment, no escalation triggered, monitoring thresholds unchanged. Devon doesn't look at any of this. He's already moved on mentally. That's another thing I notice about him. He never stays inside consequences. He just keeps moving forward, like motion itself is proof of correctness. The next day, he makes another decision. This one is bigger. A direct production adjustment. No rollback plan clearly defined, no formal QA approval. Just a quick message in Slack, going to tweak config directly in prod to stabilize session flow. A junior dev hesitates in the thread, asks if staging should be rechecked first. Devon replies almost instantly, "We'll validate live if needed, this is faster." And I just sit there reading that line thinking, live validation isn't validation, it's exposure. But again, nobody stops it. Because stopping it would require someone to say the thing that everyone is avoiding saying, that speed has started replacing safety. And I don't say it either, not out loud. Instead, I document, because documentation is the only place where truth doesn't get negotiated. By midweek, I start noticing how consistent this pattern really is. It's not random mistakes. It's a system of decisions that all lean in the same direction. Reduce friction, increase speed, minimize review. And every time someone raises a concern, it gets reframed. Too cautious, too slow, not aligned. That last one keeps coming up. Alignment. It's becoming one of those words that doesn't actually mean anything specific anymore. It just means agreement without resistance. And anything outside of agreement gets softened until it sounds like a personality trait instead of a technical concern. At one point, I try something small. I bring up a potential auth inconsistency in chat. Nothing dramatic, just a note that session refresh behavior might be unstable under concurrent load. No response from Devon. A few hours later, Kyle reacts with a thumbs up. And that's it. No discussion, no follow-up, just symbolic acknowledgement that doesn't actually acknowledge anything. I stare at that for a while longer than I should because it tells me more than any meeting ever could. They're not evaluating correctness, they're filtering for convenience. That night, I stay late again. Not because I need to, because I want to map the difference between what is being said and what is actually happening. I pull deployment logs, I cross-reference commit histories, I match Slack approvals with actual system outcomes. And what starts forming isn't chaos. It looks like structured avoidance. Warnings are consistently logged but not escalated. Testing gaps are consistently acknowledged but not addressed. Rollback paths are consistently assumed unnecessary until they suddenly become critical. And Devon sits at the center of it all, not as a malicious force, but as a confident one. And somehow that's worse. Because confidence doesn't get questioned here, it gets followed. I sit back at my desk at one point and just watch the system dashboard quietly update in real time. Green indicators everywhere. Everything looks fine at a glance. But I've been here long enough to know that green just means nothing has failed loudly yet. And I keep logging. Not because I think anyone is going to read it today, but because patterns only become undeniable after enough repetition. And I'm starting to see the shape of this one very clearly. Devon moves fast. The system absorbs risk. Warnings get softened, failures get delayed, and responsibility gets redistributed until it disappears entirely. And I'm sitting in the middle of it, not reacting anymore, just observing, recording, tracking every small decision that looks harmless in isolation, but starts to form something heavier when you step back far enough. Because at this point, I'm not trying to fix it in the moment. I'm trying to understand how something this fragile keeps presenting itself as stable. And the answer, slowly, is becoming obvious. It doesn't stay stable. It just hasn't collapsed loudly yet. So it starts small. That's always how it starts. A QA alert comes in early morning. Nothing dramatic at first glance, just a flag about authentication inconsistencies in the Galaxis environment. Session tokens not refreshing cleanly under load. One of those messages that, in a healthy system, would trigger an immediate pause. But here, it just sits. I see it land in the monitoring channel, I see the timestamp, I see the severity tag, and I already know what's going to happen next before anyone even reacts to it. Nothing. Because Devon is mid-deployment again. And Kyle is already in motion, which means the system is no longer evaluating risk. It's evaluating momentum. Devon is pushing a production change. Same pattern as before, except this one is larger, more aggressive. He's calling it a stability patch, which is ironic because it's touching the exact area QA just flagged. I remember sitting there watching the alert turn from yellow to red and thinking, okay, this is the part where someone stops it. But nobody does. Devon posts in Slack deploying now to resolve session drift. Should smooth out authentication layer. No mention of QA, no mention of the alert that just came in, just confidence, clean and immediate. A junior engineer hesitates in the thread. Asks if we should wait for confirmation from staging validation. Devon replies within seconds, we've already validated this path. Waiting introduces risk. And that line, right there, becomes the justification. Waiting is risk. Not deploying into an unstable system, not ignoring QA alerts, waiting. I sit there reading it and I can feel the system shifting under that logic. Because once that becomes the framing, anything that slows action becomes the enemy. Kyle reacts in the channel a few minutes later. Thumbs up emoji. That's it. No analysis, no question, just approval through absence of thought. And I start documenting immediately. Timestamp, QA alert triggered, severity escalated internally. Deployment initiated without resolution. Prior warning context ignored. I don't even look emotional at this point. It's almost mechanical, because I've learned that emotion slows accuracy here. By mid-morning, the first real signs of failure appear. Login requests timing out in multiple regions. Session tokens expiring prematurely. API endpoints returning inconsistent authentication responses. Nothing fully collapsed yet, but the system is starting to stutter. And the worst part is how quietly it begins. There's no dramatic crash, no single point of failure, just distributed degradation. The kind that makes people argue about whether it's actually happening. I see the dashboard flicker from green to amber in certain regions. I see alerts stacking up in QA channels that no one is actively reading anymore. And I wait. Not because I'm unsure, but because I know how long it takes before reality becomes undeniable in a room like this. Then it escalates. North American traffic starts failing authentication at scale. European endpoints begin showing session mismatches. Users start reporting login loops. And suddenly the system is no longer abstract. It's visible. Kyle finally joins the incident channel. His tone is calm, almost rehearsed. Let's not panic. We've seen transient issues like this before. Likely cache synchronization lag. That word again. Transient? Like the system is just having a temporary mood. Devon follows up immediately. Agree with Kyle. We probably just need to let propagation settle. No need to roll back yet. No need to roll back. Even as users are actively failing to authenticate, I just sit there reading it, not reacting in the thread. Because reacting in the thread is pointless now. The narrative is already being written above the technical layer. So I document every alert, every escalation, every ignored warning from QA that's now buried under new messages trying to minimize severity. Someone in ops posts a screenshot of error rates climbing. It gets labeled expected variance under load. That's when I realize something very simple. They are not interpreting data anymore. They are protecting decisions. And those are not the same thing. By noon, Galaxis systems are visibly unstable. Client dashboards start failing to load in multiple regions. Authentication loops are widespread. Internal tools begin lagging. And still, no rollback. Because rollback implies admission. And admission doesn't fit the story that's already been committed to. Devon is still talking in Slack like nothing is fundamentally wrong, using words like optimization window and adaptive stabilization. Kyle is reinforcing it with calm reassurance messages. Meanwhile, the system is bleeding, quietly but consistently. I step away from the main channel and start pulling raw logs, not filtered dashboards, not summaries, actual event traces. And what I see is exactly what I expected. The QA alert from earlier wasn't wrong, it was just ignored. Multiple warnings about session drift under concurrent load were explicitly documented, ignored. Staging inconsistencies flagged, bypassed. Rollback recommendations suggested, deferred. Every safety mechanism treated as optional friction. And I start building the timeline in real time, not for discussion, for record, because I already know where this is going. By mid-afternoon, the incident channel is chaos pretending to be structure. People asking for clarity, Kyle repeating calm phrases, Devon suggesting incremental fixes on top of unstable systems. At one point, a senior engineer finally says it directly, "We are beyond patching. We need rollback." There's a pause. Then Kyle replies, "Let's avoid drastic action until we confirm full impact scope." And that sentence does it. That's the moment the system stops being technical and becomes political. Because drastic action is now defined as fixing the problem too directly. I can feel it then, the inevitability of collapse. Not as an event, but as accumulation. So I stop waiting for permission. I open a local environment I've kept updated quietly in parallel. Not part of the official workflow, not visible in any repo tracking that matters. A stripped-down version of the system logic, cleaned, corrected, based on everything I've been logging for weeks. I already know where the failure is originating. Not a single bug. A structural flaw in session token handling under concurrency that was introduced during Devon's earlier change set and never properly validated. I write the fix. Not large, not dramatic, just precise. A normalization layer for session validation that removes the race condition introduced in the latest deployment cycle, proper retry handling, correct boundary enforcement, no speculative behavior. It takes me less than an hour because I've already written it mentally days ago. I don't push it through official channels. That would just trigger delay. Instead, I send it externally. Directly to a mid-level engineer at Galaxis I know reads logs instead of narratives. No signature, no explanation, just the patch file. Subject line, session fix. Do not escalate internally first. And then I wait. No announcement, no credit request, nothing that ties it back to me. Because at this point, attribution is irrelevant. What matters is whether the system stabilizes. 30 minutes later, I see it. Error rates begin to drop. Authentication failures decrease region by region. Session recovery stabilizes under load. The cascade starts reversing. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. Like a system remembering how to function again. In the incident channel, Kyle is still talking about controlled recovery strategy. Devon is still suggesting partial mitigations. Neither of them notice the actual fix happening in real time. Or maybe they do. And choose not to acknowledge it. I don't correct them, I don't announce anything, I just watch the metrics normalize while continuing to log everything. Every delay, every ignored alert, every misattributed recovery claim that's already forming. Because I know how this part goes. Once stability returns, the story will rewrite itself backward. And I'll probably disappear from it again. But for now, the system is healing, quietly. And I'm the only one not pretending it happened any other way. So I'm just sitting there, trying to make the rest of the day feel normal again. Like I can just slide back into routine after everything that just happened. The system's stabilizing, alerts are calming down, people are starting to talk like it's over. You know that tone people get when they think a crisis is finished and they can safely reframe it as a learning moment. And I'm not really buying it, but I'm also not reacting anymore. I'm just watching. Then my phone rings. Unknown number. Area code I don't immediately recognize, but something about it feels off in a very specific way. Not spam off, not random off, more like internal but not local. The kind of number that doesn't usually reach you directly. I almost let it go to voicemail, honestly. But I pick up, and there's this pause on the other end. Not hesitation, more like confirmation that the line is clean. Then a voice, calm, controlled, no small talk. Is this the engineer who sent the session normalization patch? And I just stop for a second, because the way he says it, it's not a question. It's already identified. I answer cautiously, yes. Another pause, slightly longer this time. Then, this is Hari Venataraman, CTO Galaxis Systems. And okay, that lands differently than anything else that day. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. Like the system itself just spoke directly. I shift my weight a little, still standing near my desk, trying not to overreact physically to what my brain is already trying to interpret too fast. Because now I get it. This isn't random contact. This is traced, he continues. Same steady tone. We've been reviewing the recovery timeline. Your patch is the only consistent change that correlates with system stabilization across regions. I don't respond immediately. Not because I don't understand what he's saying, but because I do. They followed it all the way, he goes on. Our internal teams initially attributed stabilization to rollback attempts and partial mitigation from on-site engineers. But deeper log analysis shows those interventions were incomplete. Your external patch is what resolved the session handshake failure. There it is. no ambiguity, no corporate cushioning, just attribution. And for a second, I just let that sit, because internally, that shifts something. Not emotionally loud, just structurally. He knows. They know. And they didn't need Devon or Kyle to tell them, he continues. But his tone changes slightly. Not warmer, just more deliberate. This wasn't submitted through formal channels. It's not phrased as an accusation. It's stated like a fact they've already accounted for. I reply carefully, no, it wasn't. Another pause. Then, we assume that might be the case. That part actually surprises me more than anything so far. Because it means they weren't confused. They expected it. He doesn't linger on it, though. He moves forward like that detail is already filed away. We would like to discuss this further, off record, directly with our executive group. I blink once, because that phrasing matters. Off record. Direct executive group. Not a meeting request, not a formal escalation. An invitation that exists outside the normal structure. I ask, almost automatically, who would be in that meeting? And he doesn't hesitate. Our CEO, myself, and a small technical leadership group responsible for infrastructure transitions. That's when the weight of it starts to register properly. Not just recognition, access, he continues, still measured. We are in town next week for a closed investor summit. We can arrange a discreet session. No internal visibility required. No internal visibility. That phrase sticks more than anything else, because it implies something very specific. This isn't going through Kyle, this isn't going through HR, this isn't going through the narrative layer I've been trapped under. This is above it. I lean back slightly, phone still at my ear, trying to keep my voice level. And what exactly would be the purpose of that meeting? It's a fair question, but I already know the answer is not going to be simple. He replies, we're evaluating candidates for an internal enterprise transition group, infrastructure correction initiative, system resilience architecture. Your patch revealed capabilities we weren't seeing internally. And there it is again. Not just acknowledgement, reclassification from internal risk to external value. I take a second before responding because I can feel the shift happening in real time. And I don't want to overreact into it. So this is recruitment, I ask. He corrects me gently. Consider it alignment at a higher layer. That word again. But this time it doesn't feel like constraint. It feels like access. I look out the window while he's still talking, just trying to ground myself in something physical. The office looks the same desks, same movement. Devon probably still walking around thinking he stabilized something. Kyle probably already drafting a postmortem that rewrites the entire sequence. And none of them know this call is happening. He continues, we would expect discretion until formal onboarding. If you accept the meeting, we proceed privately. I ask, why me? And there's a short pause, not hesitation, just precision. Then he says, because your fix worked without permission. That's rare. And because it worked when internal consensus failed. That last part sits differently. Internal consensus failed. Not the system, not the code, the people. I shift again, quieter now. When would this meeting be? Thursday, 10 a.m. Details will be sent through a secured channel. Another pause. Then he adds, almost as an afterthought, but not really. You may want to prepare for a transition conversation internally before then. We assume there may be friction. Friction. That's a polite word for what's coming. I almost laugh at that, but I don't, because he's right. There will be friction. I tell him I understand. He doesn't push further, just confirms logistics again. Then ends the call cleanly. No closing sentiment, no soft exit, just done. And suddenly I'm standing there with a phone in my hand, like the room didn't change, but everything in it did, because now it's real. Not speculation, not internal logging, not patterns, external validation. And the strangest part is how quiet it feels. No announcement, no spotlight, no immediate reaction from the system around me. Just this private shift that nobody else is aware of yet. I sit down slowly, more out of instinct than necessity, and just replay the call in my head. Not the words exactly, the implications. They traced it, they validated it, they isolated it, and they came to me. Not Kyle, not Devon, me. And I realized something kind of simple in that moment. The system didn't fail when things broke. It failed when it couldn't see who actually fixed it. And now it sees. And that changes everything, even if nothing else has changed yet. So Monday morning hits, and I already know this session is going to feel different. Not because anything on the calendar says so, but because I've stopped pretending this is just another coaching check-in. It's not. Not anymore. Still, I walk in. Same room, same setup, same circle of chairs, like we're about to unpack emotions instead of accountability. Kyle's already there, sitting like he owns the air in the room. Devon's next to him, relaxed, scrolling on his laptop like none of this ever had consequences. HR's there too, Sandra again, pen ready, expression already pre-written. And I sit down, quiet, neutral, observing. Kyle starts talking immediately, like he's been waiting to close something out. All right, he says, this is a continuation of our alignment process. We're going to wrap up feedback cycles and reinforce team cohesion. And I just nod slightly, not agreeing, just acknowledging noise. Devon smiles at me like this is all normal. Like the last incident didn't nearly tear the system apart. Like he didn't spend half a week pushing changes he didn't fully understand while I quietly documented every failure in the background. Kyle continues, we want to ensure everyone feels heard in this space. That word again, space. Like this is a safe environment instead of a controlled narrative loop. And I'm about to say nothing, like I usually do now, because I've learned silence is more useful than argument here. When the door opens, no knock, no hesitation, just open. And everything in the room shifts immediately. Because the person who walks in doesn't belong to this layer of the system. Elias Mercer, CEO of Galaxis systems. And the air in the room literally changes, not metaphorically, it just tightens. Kyle freezes mid-sentence. Actually freezes, like someone hit pause on him. Devon looks up too fast, confusion flickering across his face because this is not on his mental map of what today was supposed to be. HR's pen stops moving. Nobody speaks. Elias doesn't sit. He doesn't introduce himself. He just closes the door behind him and looks around the room like he's already read the transcript of everything that's happened here before he arrived. Then his eyes land on me, and he holds it for a second longer than necessary. Not dramatic, just intentional. Kyle tries to recover first. Of course he does. He stands halfway, voice shifting into that careful corporate tone people use when they're not sure what level of authority just entered the room. Mr. Mercer, we weren't expecting. Elias raises a hand slightly, not aggressive, just stopping motion. You can sit, he says. Kyle sits. And it's immediate. That small moment of compliance changes everything in the room dynamic. Because once the highest authority in the system tells you to stop performing leadership, you stop being perceived as leadership. Elias finally speaks fully now. Calm voice, controlled, no filler. I've reviewed the incident chain for the Galaxis authentication failure. A pause. I've reviewed the internal response, the escalation handling, and the resolution path. He looks briefly at Devon, then back at Kyle. And I've reviewed attribution. That word lands heavier than anything else so far. Attribution. Kyle shifts in his seat, just slightly, but I notice it. Devon looks like he's trying to understand what direction this conversation is going in, but he doesn't have enough information yet to even form a defensive posture. Elias continues, the production stabilization event was not resolved through internal remediation efforts. Pause. It was resolved by an external patch submitted outside formal channels, and now the room is completely still. No one moves. He turns his gaze fully to me again. Submitted by you. It's not a question. It's confirmation. Kyle exhales something sharp through his nose, like a reflexive denial forming before he even speaks. There must be some misunderstanding, he says quickly. We had multiple mitigation steps in progress. Devon's team was actively... Elias doesn't even look at him while responding. Your mitigation steps did not resolve the failure condition. That's it. Clean, final, no space left for interpretation. Devon finally speaks, but his voice is off. Not confident anymore, just confused. Wait, we stabilized it though, right? The dashboards went green. We coordinated recovery. Elias interrupts, still calm. After the external fix was applied, silence again. Longer this time. And I can actually feel the shift now. Not just in the room, but in how people are holding themselves. Kyle is no longer in control of framing. Devon is no longer confident in narrative. HR is no longer participating. Elias continues, measured. We traced system stabilization directly to a session normalization patch that was not submitted through internal governance pipelines. He pauses slightly. We traced it to a personal deployment from this engineer. He gestures slightly toward me. And that's when Kyle breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cracks. Because he tries to speak again, but nothing clean comes out at first. That wasn't authorized escalation procedure, he says finally. We weren't aware of any external intervention being required at that stage. If there was a gap in communication, Elias cuts him off again, quieter this time. There was no gap in communication. Pause. There was failure to act on communication. And that lands like a final accounting. Kyle sits back slowly, not responding anymore, just absorbing. Devon looks between everyone now, visibly lost. Like he's realizing for the first time that the version of events he's been living inside doesn't match what's being described in this room. He finally asks, almost quietly, "So, what does that mean?" And nobody answers him immediately, because Elias is already looking at me again. And this is the part I didn't fully expect, even after the call. He says, "We would like to formally extend an internal transition offer." He pauses. "You will be joining our enterprise infrastructure correction group, reporting directly under executive technical leadership. No embellishment, no soft framing, just placement." Then he adds, "Effective immediately upon your acceptance." I don't react outwardly, but internally, I feel the shift fully now. Because this isn't just recognition, this is extraction from this system, from this structure, from this narrative they've been controlling around me. Kyle tries one more time, voice tighter now. "Elias, with respect, this completely bypasses internal review structures. There are HR protocols, performance frameworks." Elias finally looks at him directly, and it's the first time his tone changes slightly. Not emotional, just colder. "Your internal review structures failed to identify the source of system recovery." Pause. "They also misattributed responsibility for both failure and resolution." Another pause. "That is not a framework worth preserving." And Kyle just stops. Fully. No response left. Devon looks like he wants to say something, but whatever he was going to say doesn't make it out. HR doesn't move at all anymore. They're just there, witnessing. And I realize something in that moment that's almost quiet. The story is over. Not loudly, not publicly, just structurally. Elias steps slightly to the side, giving me space. Not commanding, just opening a path. And I stand slowly. No rush, no performance, just movement. I look around the room once. Not for validation, not for reaction. Just acknowledgement of where things were and where they are now. Kyle doesn't look at me anymore. Devon is still stuck somewhere between confusion and denial. HR is frozen in procedural silence that doesn't apply anymore. And I speak for the first time in the room, not to defend anything, not to explain, just to close it. "Okay," I say. "That's it." Then I pick up my bag. Elias turns toward the door first. I follow. No one stops us. No one speaks. Because there's nothing left to say that fits inside the structure they were operating in. As I walk out, I can feel it behind me. The collapse isn't loud. It's administrative. It's narrative. It's the moment a system realizes it can't rewrite what just happened fast enough to matter. And I don't look back. Because for the first time in a long time, I don't need to be part of their version of events anymore. And yeah, after that, everything just kind of goes quiet. Not in a dramatic way, just in that natural way things do when a system stops pretending. I walked away from all of it. And for once, there was no confusion about where I stood anymore. Funny how things shift when you're finally seen in the right place. Anyway, if you made it this far, feel free to like or subscribe, or don't. It's all good either way.